Welcome to the New Hampshire Union Leaders Voters First Forums. My name is Joe McQuaid, publisher of the Union Leader.
And I'm Todd Fahey, State Director of AARP New Hampshire. AARP is a nonpartisan advocacy organization. We're looking forward to hearing candidate positions on important issues. This year, we're focused on Social Security and what candidates will do to ensure that this program remains strong and available for future generations.
If you're watching this live on YouTube, feel free to submit a question. And now, let's hear from a candidate. Okay, we're on the air with Governor Gatsas, who's running for something.
Then why are we having this interview
I don't know.
with the title you just called me?
We can cut it short. But no, seriously, thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
We want to get a sense of why you are running for the office of governor, and why now, and what you think is important about it. You are the mayor of the state's largest city, which is a pretty good credential for running for higher office. I want to ask you first a question about the state's largest city. Do you know why they put in pipe on Elm Street, paved it over, and then dug it up?
Yes, I do.
Why
And
was that?
the reason for doing that is because some of the engineering that was done on the pipe was incorrect, and some of the houses had some of the sewage come back into their homes, so the contractor dug it up and did what the correct solutions were, so that that won't happen again.
Well, you say some of the engineering, I'm given to understand they just put in the wrong size pipe. It was too small. And how can that happen on a project this important to the city? And what is the mayor going to do to make sure that it doesn't happen again? Because as you say, it backed up into people's houses. They'd already been inconvenienced once by the paving, and then it's up again, so.
Well, I can tell you,
How'd you find out about it?
I heard about it from the homeowners. They actually called my office. I responded to them. I then called Public Works and told them they needed to get up there and talk to the homeowners directly and make sure they took care of the problem immediately. And Park Construction, who was doing the construction project there, was notified, and they had to go in and do the repairs.
Right, that wasn't the whole project, though.
No, it was not the whole project. It was just a section of the.
Like one of the first sections.
It was one of the first sections.
Yeah, and you're also to blame for that wall falling down, aren't you, Mr. Mayor?
Well, I think that for some reason, when things happen that are good in the city, we don't ever hear the compliments of saying,
Right.
Thanks, you did a good job, but when the wall falls down, as you're walking Elm Street, we heard about that also. I think that has some repercussions from the vibrations of the compacting of the street, and they're looking at that now.
It's been leaning over for quite a long time. As mayor of the state's largest city, you have a certain amount of power, and I think it is greater than the governor has. It's a pretty weak form of governor, so what are the three most important things that a governor does in this state, as you see them, and how would you go about doing them?
Well, you know, there isn't that much power as mayor. You've got to still muster 8 votes to get anything truly done. Mm-hmm. You can call departments, as we did with the Elm Street problem, and get them to respond to folks, but there's not a whole heck of a lot you can do as mayor without the guidance of the alderman or the school board, as I serve on the chairman of the school board. I think as governor, it's the same thing. I was a state senator. I understood how you had to get people together, to get people to understand what you were bringing forward and how you get the votes to get it done.
Would it be rated on your report card that Governor Ted Gatsas plays well with others in the legislature and the state senate?
I would say that, on my report card would say that he certainly has ideas to come forward and solutions and talks about them, and will tell you where he stands looking you straight in the eye so that you don't have to worry about where Ted Gatsas stands on a solution or a problem.
And you think, based on the personalities that are up there and that you've dealt with and that are likely to be up there, that a Governor Gatsas could successfully deal with the legislature?
There's no question. I think that if you start from day one and get everybody into a room and make sure that everybody has an understanding that the door is always open, let's talk about the issues and let's get things done for the state of New Hampshire and its citizens.
So before I stop monopolizing this, the three things that you think are most important for a governor to do.
The three things that I see the most important in this state as I've been traveling through the state and hearing about the questions that employers have, about education, about energy, and about health care. The first thing we have to do is make sure that 30% of the power from Northern Pass stays in this state to reduce our energy costs. If we'd have done something like that with Seabrook and kept 20% of the power in the state of New Hampshire, we wouldn't have the highest rates in the area when it comes to energy. Northern Pass, if it happens, 30% of that power, not 10, 30% has to stay in New Hampshire to reduce the cost, and it needs to appear on people's bills so that they can see, here's your credit for the energy that we've saved and we're bringing to the state of New Hampshire.
How'd you come up with 30%?
Well, again, it's all about negotiating. So certainly it's something that the people that I've talked to, we don't know what that number is. I can only go back and take a look and see what the cost of hydropower was back when I was in the Senate and try and make some reasonable adjustments to what it might be today. But it's still one of the most least expensive cost of power that we can find.
We have a question from someone watching on YouTube, and I won't read the actual question because I don't think it totally captures where you actually stand on the issue. So why don't we just lay it out for viewers? Where do you stand on the idea of Medicaid expansion?
Well, Medicaid expansion, we have 50,000 people in the state of New Hampshire right now that are insured by it. To just take them and say to them, we're ending Medicaid expansion without a program behind it is going to put people into the emergency rooms like we used to have before. That's just going to increase the cost for the rest of us that are on health insurance, because the hospitals have to pass it along somewhere, and we're going to see that. Are there programs we can look at for Medicaid expansion? Sure there are. Let's find a New Hampshire solution to a problem that is here in New Hampshire, and let's get that done. In the state of Ohio, they have a program out there that doctors and patients and hospitals get together, and if the patient goes to the low-cost provider, they get a piece of the savings that is generated. If the doctor is the low-cost provider, they pay the doctor a piece of those savings. So that if people are going to the low-cost providers and they're taking personal responsibility in their health care, there will be a direct savings. Those are some of the things that we need to look at for a New Hampshire solution.
Don't we already have that in New Hampshire? A program that provides for the patient to receive something back if he goes to the low-cost provider?
I don't think that's part of Medicaid expansion.
It's not part of Medicaid expansion.
No, but we have it, yes. We were the first community in the state to implement that. It was called Compass. We took, I think, 15 or 20 different procedures that if you went into that low-cost provider, you would get a check back from the city of Manchester for that assistance. The state of New Hampshire was the next company that went with it, and it's working for them. As a matter of fact, it's working better for them because, as I've always said, if you don't have a higher deductible, people aren't going to go in and look for a reimbursement if your deductible is $100 or $200. The state's is $500. So when they go in and get a check back for $250 because they're going to the low-cost provider, that's a benefit to them.
So that's your plan for the 50,000 who are currently?
No, I'm saying
Medicaid?
no, I say that's part of it. We need to look for a New Hampshire solution. Have I sat down and met with the folks on a New Hampshire solution? No, I haven't. I can only tell you that we've got to talk about it. We've done some things in
Well,
this.
you're running for governor.
We are.
Yeah.
There's no question. We've done things on the city side that have reduced costs. We have an HSA plan in the city that we implemented 5 years ago. And that's personal responsibility for employees. And it gives them an opportunity. We have one of the richer plans around that say that we'll supplement your $2,000 deductible with $1,500. If you don't use the $1,500, it rolls over. You can add another $1,850 to that plan so that it continues. So those are things that we've implemented. They don't have that with the state employees. There are 28,000 employees. They don't have an HSA plan, and they don't have an opt-out clause. And that the opt-out is if that you are willing to go onto your spouse's health care, City of Manchester pays you $4,000. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's important. That saved us $1 million the first year we implemented it. So I think we can implement that at the state and save an awful lot of dollars, certainly at the state level with the state employees.
Energy, health, and education.
Education, when I go into manufacturing companies and I visit with them, the biggest problem they have is they can't find people ready to go to work. And I tell them that in Manchester, we started the School of Technology as a full 4-year high school. where students can go in, learn the plumbing trades, learn the welding trades, learn to be mechanical engineers, to learn to culinary arts, beauticians, and they can graduate and be ready to go to work. And I think the biggest problem we have is that the manufacturing companies, when you say manufacturing to a student, they think about it as their grandfather's mill. Dirty, old, not something that we see today. I was in 2 plants yesterday, Sig Sauer. You would have thought that they manufactured medical equipment. I mean, and they have 140 positions that they can't fill. And I told them about the program, and I said, it's not about going to the schools to talk to the kids about the program, it's actually bringing the students out here so they can see the facility, so you can take them through, so that you can find a program that you can bring them in as mentors or as students during the course of the year, so that they can see what you're doing and be excited about coming out and getting a job. I think that's what we need to do in this state. We have 9 of those technical schools. We have to change them into full-time high schools so that students throughout the state can go there, graduate, and be ready to go to work. Not everybody's going to college.
When you say we have 9 of these technical schools, you mean at the high school level?
High school level, where they actually send students from the high schools, from various high schools, for 180 minutes a week to the facility. We've changed it in Manchester so they actually stay there and take their core courses also, math, English, and they're right there for the full day.
And what tracking mechanism have you put on the School of Technology in Manchester to see how this works? You say it works, the kids get jobs, the employers have skilled people.
That's a great question. I think it's important because when you go to the private sector and you ask them to get involved and help out, they want to see outcomes. This year we had our first graduating class. We had 54 students that graduated. In September we had 125 applications, but we couldn't take all of the students because we didn't have the space. Yet across the street is Memorial High School. We could find 8 classes to 10 classes that we could move some of those students into, and they could operate right out of that as a freshman class so that we had the space rather than saying, we can't take you because you want to go. So we've increased the capacity to just about 100. So I think it's important that we find educational opportunities for all kids. Because as I said, not everybody's going to college.
Regarding education, are you satisfied with the education funding in the state and the way it's done?
Well, I think I would tell you that we need a constitutional amendment.
Which would do what?
Which would take the legislature out of the funding, or the courts out of the funding discussion, and allow that up to the legislature. We were very close when I was in the Senate. We had a bill that I thought made a lot of sense, that the governor
The Democratic governor was willing to
supported it and
not
supported it, and we had it. We were 1 vote short in the Senate to get it forward, and I think it's time because it's only been 10 years, and we're back in court.
I don't hear a lot about it at the grassroots level, though, from people running for office saying that this is a great concern and we're for a constitutional amendment. How are you going to get popular support for that?
Well, I think that it's like anything else. Whenever you brought out a education funding formula, nobody ever listened to you talking about the formula. They used to look and see, what does my community get? Mm-hmm. And that was more important than anything else in any formula. So I think that today we have to be realistic. We are going to continue to be in court. And there's no reason for us to be in court because we should find a way that we get the money to the classes that need the support. The targeted aid is most important. Now, I can't tell you that the formula that's up there when they talk about stabilization grants and they talk about increasing some of the costs, I don't know where they get the number from. You know, the city of Manchester, because our student count is down, we not only lose a stabilization grant, but we also are losing the adequacy grant on the front end. So that's almost like a double hit for the same thing, and I don't think anybody's well aware of that. So I say we need to get an educational funding formula that makes sense so that it goes to the communities that need the support. And let's get a constitutional amendment once and for all.
Mr. Mayor, I haven't looked at your bright yellow package yet. Do you have constitutional amendment wording for this?
Exact same wording that we had when I was up there and presented it.
Okay.
And certainly I would get you a copy of it so you could see it, but I think that it's easy enough to find.
Well, I know, I'm aware of the previous wording. I don't have it
It's
memorized,
exactly the
but,
same.
yeah, it's what John Lynch was for, and Chuck Douglas was for, and a lot
Yes.
of people were for at the time.
And I also support a constitutional amendment once and for all for an income tax. Let's let the people speak, and let's be done with the discussion about whether we're going to see an income tax in the state of New Hampshire. If one comes to my desk, I would veto it, along with a sales tax.
Let's talk about keeping on education. If you were governor and there were 4 or 5 kids in Croydon who wanted to go to, the town wanted to pay to send them to a Montessori school, what would you do?
The bill that was prepared in both the House and the Senate, and it was ready for signature by the governor, I would sign it. I believe in school choice. I believe it's important. I believe in parental choice and local control. I would never appoint an education commissioner that doesn't have those two things in the forefront of their mind.
Is it true that you have said that you want to make the Manchester Police Chief the next safety commissioner in the state?
I don't know where that comes from. I think we already have one. And certainly, I
So you
can,
haven't made any promises?
I have not made any promises to anybody. I can tell you Chief Willard does a great job. That conversation has never come up between the two of us.
Staying on that subject, one of your opponents for the Republican gubernatorial nomination has suggested that to fight the drug epidemic, that we put New Hampshire National Guardsmen on the border with Canada and the border with Massachusetts. Is that something that you would entertain,
No, I would not,
and why?
because it doesn't make any sense. There's no way that you can enforce that with the border controls that you think you can, because they'll come in from the Vermont border or they'll come in from the Maine border. So-
Vermont is the one that we should have shut off a long time ago.
Well, I don't disagree with you, but I can tell you that that doesn't make any sense about doing that. I think there needs to be a definite loud cry to the presidential person that's there, to have him understand or her understand that this is when you talk about Zika and the virus, and 14 people had it or 17 people had it in Florida, this epidemic is so much greater than that. When you hear the numbers that 47,000 people died from opiate overdoses in 2014, that is a staggering number in this country. We've got to do something, or we're going to continue. This number, I understand, is growing to over 60,000 in 2015.
Mr. Mayor, you, I don't know if it was your proposal, but you certainly were in back of it from the start, the safe stations in Manchester with the fire department. Is that something that, as governor, you would push to other communities?
Well, I can tell you that the way that came about is that fire chief called me and said, we have a proposal that we think might work. He came in along with the gentleman, Chris Hickey, that put it together, along with the police chief. Mm-hmm. Now, in other communities, in Gloucester, they talk about a program that police have enforced. I talked to the police chief about doing that here, and he said, Mayor, we enforce the laws. I can't, in all conscience, see somebody that comes in and they have drugs, and I'm going to say, come on, let me help you, when the day before I was looking to arrest him because he was dealing drugs. So Chris Hickey came in, rolled out the program of safe stations. It made a lot of sense to me. I thought it was important because if people are going to come to you for help on their own, that means they're truly ready. Now, I've always been a believer of that. And he said to me, well, Mayor, this might take 6 to 12 months to get done. I said, you get 3 weeks. People are dying. Let's get it done. He sent that up to the Department of Safety on a Thursday. We got a response back on Monday saying, go ahead, run with it. It sounds like it makes sense. So we put it in place. Since May 4th, we've had 377, and by today it could be over 400, 377 people that have gone to the fire stations looking for help. The busiest day they had was Father's Day. 12 individuals went in that day because they wanted to go back and be with their kids. This is not the silver bullet, but it's an opportunity. There are 2 other communities that are talking about it now to join us, Auburn and Hooksett.
Auburn and Hooksett, do they have the capacity to do this with their fire station?
Yes, they're full-time.
Well, the city of Concord is full-time, and they have 4 fire stations, and they said, as of yesterday, that there's no way that they could put this program into place.
Well, I can only say that it's working in the city of Manchester. I read that article today, and it certainly makes sense that we should do it. I mean, Concord's another community that has an awful lot of opiate problems in it. And it's something that I think that if they came down and talked to our fire department, I think they would see that it makes sense, because they're going out on those calls already. They're the first responders. When somebody calls 911 and says there's an overdose, they're the first ones to respond. So if they're coming in and they're saying they want help, and again, you know, some of the uniqueness of this is that, you know, Hope for Recovery was coming over and they had a drug coach that came in. They would talk to the individual. They would take them back to Amber's place. Now, we've grown so large with this in such a quick time. We just met Monday to see how do we revamp this, because it is so large. And we're meeting again tomorrow to talk about some changes we should make based on the number of people that are coming in and the capacities.
You meaning the number of people that are turning out for it?
Correct.
That it's difficult to keep up with?
It is very difficult.
While we're talking about first responders in the city in the last few weeks, we've had stories of, we had a story about somebody shooting at EMTs on duty, trying to help other people. We had 2 police officers shot on the west side. We've seen crime increase, violent crime increase in the last year. You're the mayor. Do you have any responsibility for that?
Well, I can tell you that we've increased our police force. You know, when I got the call at 2 o'clock in the morning, the 2 police officers were shot and hit and in the hospital. It took me about 15 minutes to get to the hospital. That is probably, as mayor for 7 years, that was the worst phone call I can remember getting. And I can tell you when I was there, a lot of things run through your mind. Yes, there are people out there, and again, this individual that did the shooting shouldn't have had a gun. He had a mental illness. There's no question. So I think that a lot of the things that we're doing, and the other night, yes, there were shootings. They couldn't find the person because the shots were coming from the woods. But again, that's a very tragic thing when police officers are out there trying to help people and their lives are being taken. That's just not right. I hope that never happens in the city of Manchester. But I can tell you the one thing that people talk about are the crimes. We had 18 shootings in about a 2.5-week period. It was all the same person, and they caught him. But people don't talk about that, because I think you will see that our arrest rate for people that are committing these crimes is higher than the national average. We've got a police department that does the work and apprehends the people that are being bad. And that's what's most important. Can't stop people from wanting to break into a house, break into a car. There's not much we can do, even if we're standing there. We've got you know, a program in the Manchester Police Department, that predictive policing, that tells you, here, I think that the crimes are going to happen in this two-block radius. We put police officers in those areas. Chief has done a great job with that.
Are you fully staffed with the police department now?
I can't tell you we're at full complement, because I don't know in the last 2 weeks if anybody's retired or if they've left. But we were at full staff just a short time ago.
And in answer to Trent's question about the responsibility of the mayor relative to crime and safety, do you feel that you've done a good job?
I've worked very hard at it. I have conversations every day with the chief about what can we do and how do we do it. You know, we were concerned a few months ago about the safety of the police officers with the heroin and the fentanyl, probably fentanyl worse, of detecting it when they ended up arresting somebody. So we bought 2 pieces of equipment so that we could detect it early and nobody would be coming in contact with it. So we try and do everything possible to make sure that our police officers are safe and our citizens of this great city are safe. And I would do the same thing as governor.
With regard to the opioid epidemic, this has been a flashpoint in this primary. I want you to respond to what Chris Sununu has said. There's been a lack of leadership on your part. He basically says, geez, if Mayor Gatsas had been paying attention to this issue in 2013, 14, it wouldn't have become the problem it was in 15 and 16. Your response?
Well, my response is that I can tell you I've been talking about it for over 1.5 years. We're coming to the table with solutions, and we talk about it. I went to more events with families that were having children that were addicts than you can imagine. There have been more parents that have walked into my office with tears in their eyes because they said, Mayor, you know, my son last night, I walked into his bedroom and he was there with a needle in his arm. And I've got no place I can put him because he's a minor. So it happens on a very regular basis. And when people say that there's been no leadership, it's all about politics. And I will not engage in that because we have great men and women on the police department that are battling this epidemic every single day along with firefighters. So when you take the time, and probably in my political career, the one thing that moved me more than anything was the day that I went into the NICU unit at CMC, and there were 3 children in there that were born opiate addicted. And watching nurses rock them for hours because these babies cry and cry and cry, and there's concern that they're going to detach their retinas, and they don't stop crying until they're just about rocked to sleep. And that continues for about a 9-month period. So when people want to say we aren't doing anything, they should take some of the visits that I've taken.
Mr. Mayor, were you satisfied with the police chief and the police department getting involved in this political discussion in response to one of your opponents?
Well, I can only tell you that Chief Willard is his own person. When he feels that he's being attacked or his men and women are being attacked, he defends them. And when somebody wants to sit there and say there's been no leadership when that police department has been in the forefront of this.
So you have no problem with the police department using an official Twitter account to respond to a political criticism?
I would never say that they should use a political Twitter account to do it.
It's not a political, it's a government Twitter account.
A government Twitter account, they shouldn't be doing that, but if they want to do it on their personal account, that certainly would be up to them.
So did you take any action or speak to the chief and the department after they used the department account?
I certainly told him that I think that anytime he twitters, he should do it on his own personal account.
Is Twitter or a tweet? I'm not
Tweet.
On the opioid epidemic, do you think we should, if you were elected, do you think we should have a state of emergency? And what exactly?
When I'm elected, I will declare that day one, state of
what's that
emergency.
going to do?
It heightens the discussion about where we're at. And it makes people to understand, look, there were $5 million that were appropriated back in November for this epidemic. It still hasn't gotten to the streets. Why? Because the RFPs haven't gone out? Everybody knew the legislation, the governor was going to sign it. The RFPs should have been started in May and April so that those dollars could be on the street, just like Granite Hammer. The Granite Hammer dollars were approved. That $1.5 million still hasn't gotten to the street. That's wrong. That's lack of leadership.
Would a state of emergency change that?
No, but I think what it does is it heightens the discussion throughout the entire state. A lot of people think that this is only an epidemic here in Manchester. I don't care where you go in the state, what size community, it's being talked about in every single one of them. I was in Berlin. They were talking about it in Berlin. They were talking about it in Colebrook. It's a concern in Conway. It's a concern everywhere throughout the state.
Well, if it's a concern everywhere and they're talking about it everywhere, isn't it already heightened awareness?
Yeah, but I don't think that they're getting enough people to the table to say, let's find some solutions. How are we going to do this? Now, all of a sudden, there's more money, and everybody wants some of the money because they think they can fix the problem.
Back to Trent's question, what is a state of emergency by itself going to do to get people around the table? How many symposiums can one have, which we've covered?
The round tables.
The round tables.
Sure, that's a great
About-
question.
about the
Let me just say that when, about a year and a half ago, I called the 3 hospitals in to my office. And one of the doctors that was sitting at the table said, Mayor, this is the first time that anybody's got all 3 hospitals together to have this conversation. So that's what needs to happen. There needs to be leadership. There are 26 hospitals in this state. I'm not saying that they should take the responsibility for this opiate epidemic, but they should be part of the discussion to tell us what they think and how we can move it forward. That's the state of emergency we need to have. We need to get everybody on the same page so that even the Concord Fire Department understands that safe stations make sense. How do we get them to understand that to move it forward? So I think that that's what's most important.
Let's talk about hospitals. We're about to break some news that the new CEO at the Elliott Hospital is departing. from the look on your face, it sounds like maybe you already knew this.
I
Yeah.
thought he was our source.
No, I just heard it this morning.
You heard it this morning. Do you think that hospitals need to go through the process of getting this certification of need before they build?
That's a good question. I think that it's important that when we look at where we are with healthcare, that they've got to be in the conversation. Because you don't build $60 million buildings and don't think that that charge is not coming back on healthcare costs, because it is.
And in this case, it's maybe a $700 million building.
They tell me it's over 5 at least, so, but that's, and again, and a lot of this has to do with the services that folks are going to get. I can remember the last time, and you probably remember Optima. And we were at the time one of the largest employers in the city of Manchester, Staffing Network. And the federal government called us, and they asked us what we thought. And we said, look, if it's not going to change healthcare as we know it, then that's fine. But if it's going to change any sort of services to whether the employee goes to CMC or whether they go to the Elliott, that's affecting the employee in healthcare. Well, they told us, no, there's no change. Within 4 months, we had an employee that had they gone for services at the Elliott, it would have been about a $2,200 cost. They went to CMC for that same service, and they had to be inpatient for it to be provided rather than home-based. It was over $30,000. Well, I called the guy that told me nothing was going to change. I says, well, it just changed in 4 months. You told me that the services would be equal at both hospitals. They aren't. That's what we have to pay attention to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Mr. Mayor, what is the current status of the certificate of need?
I think they've changed it, but I'm not sure that they changed it to the better.
I thought that they had greatly reduced the certificate of need so that it's,
They've reduced it, but I don't think that the reduction in the certificate of need has made it make sense when they're doing it. Look, things happen in Concord that we all believe are the right thing to happen. Kind of like the law that they just passed, the Good Samaritan bill, that says you walk into somebody's apartment and somebody calls 911 and that person is laying on the floor because of an opiate overdose and there's 2 pounds of whatever it is on the table, you won't be charged. Well, that doesn't make sense to me. It should be there should be a penalty. You know, in my opiate plan, I talk about penalties. I say that if anybody gets caught dealing fentanyl, they should be arrested for attempted murder. If somebody dies from that fentanyl that they've dealt, they should be put away without the possibility of parole. I say let's step it up and get it to felony first, get it out of the district court and get it into the superior court, and judges have to start applying the right bails, because when somebody gets arrested on Tuesday and they're back out on the street dealing it on Thursday, that's just not right.
Do you think people like Ian McPherson, the guy who allegedly shot 2 police officers on the west side, do you think people like him who have documented mental health illnesses, do you think the state should be submitting their names to the NCIS system?
If somebody has been adjudicated for mental illness, that should be submitted to NICS. No question. Those people should not own a gun.
do you own a gun?
I don't own a gun.
Really? Feel safe in Manchester?
I
without
feel
owning a
safe.
gun?
What would you do with business taxes, Mayor? You talked about trying to create an even better, robust business climate, even after the first tax cuts we've had in 25 years. What more
Well,
needs to happen?
there's no question we need to continue reducing our BET tax and our BPT tax. And it doesn't make sense to me that a company that is losing money should be paying a BET tax. That makes absolutely no sense. You're not encouraging entrepreneurs to go out and take a chance. You're looking to punish them if they don't make it in a very quick way. So I say let's find ways to eliminate that to the companies that aren't making money, and how can we help them? Because they're the ones that create the jobs and not government. Let's make it easier for them.
One of the first jobs of a governor is preparing the budget. What will your budget look like? How big would it be percentage-wise over the current budget? Where would you cut? Where would you increase? Have you had a chance to think about that?
Well, I can tell you that no other candidate in this race has been an executive in the mayor's in the largest city in the state, and they've not had to live under a tax cap. I can tell you that after being the first mayor that's had to live under the tax cap, it works. It puts the checks and balances in place that the people of Manchester wanted.
Didn't they just override it?
They did override it. They did override it. And, you know, there was another one that was overridden. And I think you will remember, I had the conversation with you and told you that if we don't override this tax cap, the fire department, the police department are going to be devastated. We can't lay these people off for the safety of this city. So I will support a tax cap override, but to a small amount, so that we can get them their funding. So I can tell you that as I look at the budget, there are things that I used to do in Concord, trying to rearrange the budget. Let's take all the agencies that are in that 11 or 1,200 page book, the ones that really don't make an impact, and let's move them to the side and move them through the process quicker so that we're not looking at their budgets, because their budgets are not going to make an impact one way or the other on the state. And let's take the departments that are really the departments that we need to look at. DOT, Health and Human Services, Safety, and let's look and see what we can do and how we can do it. In the city of Manchester, all the departments used to have health insurance in their line items. When I became mayor, I took them out. I would look to do the same thing in Concord. There's no reason why somebody as a department head thinks they can control cost when they can't. They hire a single person, the cost is X. They merely submit those costs back to administrative services, and that's where those bills are. Let's pull it out of there. Let's have the conversation as we've done in Manchester. How do we control our costs? Let's find a way to institute an HSA. That will be something that will reduce our costs. Let's do an opt-out. That will be do something to reduce our costs. Workers' comp. City of Manchester, we've reduced our workers' comp rates.
So is the state.
Well, we've took it down about 30% in the first year. So those are things that we have to look at. In the city of Manchester, I look at every contract that goes out. Department heads come in and report once a month to us where their revenue and expenditures are, not once a quarter. You cannot make the changes you need to make if your department is running in the red after you see those numbers at the end of a quarter. If you saw them on a monthly basis, you could make decisions on where you should go and how the changes should be. That's what we do in the city, and guess what? It works. It makes sense. And we need to look at every single nickel that we spend.
You seem to be walking a fine line on a certain railroad track where you have not said you're for it and you've not said you're against it. You said it needs to be studied.
No, what I said was, give me a plan. If you present me with a plan that I can look at that tells me how many trips a day and what the cost is going to be and who's going to pay for it, then I can give you an intelligent answer.
Well, all that material is available. How many trips a day and the cost for each
Nothing
trip?
that I've seen that was firm.
That was firm. What is unfirm that you've seen?
I've not seen exactly how many trips a day. They said it could be 4, it could be 8, that leave Boston and leave Manchester.
And 4 would not be good, 8 would be good?
I can't tell you that because you would have to tell me what time they're leaving.
Well,
If you tell me that the last trip's leaving at 6:30 in the morning to get to Boston and it's a 2.5-hour trip, I might say to you that doesn't make sense. And if you said to me that Manchester's got 2 hubs and they're going to charge you $1 million per hub to entertain rail, I would tell you I'm not supporting that.
Well, what would you support then?
I would look at a plan to see what makes sense.
Would you take the 30% from the Northern
No.
Pass and apply it to the rail?
No,
I mean,
because that
some of-
30% should go in to reduce energy costs for everybody in this state.
Well, the 30% figure, when I asked you about it, you weren't hard and fast on that because you say you don't know the numbers. With trains, you say you don't know the numbers. How is the voter supposed to have confidence in the Governor Gatsas that he's going to look hard at numbers or soft at numbers, depending on what audience he's talking with?
I think my experience here at the City of Manchester will tell you that I look at numbers in a very efficient way to find out how we can make government run.
Okay, so you're not unalterably opposed to rail service from Concord and Manchester to Boston?
As long as it's not costing the taxpayers dollars.
Then you're
And you
against, any
there ever
train
been,
service.
has there ever been a train service that didn't cost taxpayer dollars?
Well, in Maine, they take the CMAQ money and they use it to offset the funding there.
CMAQ, what's that?
That's
Federal money?
federal money.
Yeah, and you could support something like that?
No, I
If it was-
couldn't.
Okay,
Because that CMAQ money is going to roads and
Right.
infrastructures in the North Country.
Yep.
That used to be Councilor Burton's, I guess, I don't want to call it slush fund, Kevin, but it was certainly something that he knew a lot about to how to move those dollars around.
Where are you on the Interstate 93 expansion from here to the border, where a third lane on either side is being built, but a fourth lane, while scoped out, is not being built because the
Salt.
Yeah, well, because of the Conservation Law Foundation and others suing the state. Where does that stand, and who calls the shots on how much salt?
When I first took office, 93 was going to cost us $195 million to complete. That number is now over 800 million. That doesn't make sense. Every morning, I don't care what radio station you're listening to, they give you the traffic report. Exit 3 has an accident, find another way. That needs to be completed. And you're right. Does it make sense that somebody's telling us the fourth lane can't be used because of salt? It snows in New Hampshire. Roads get icy. Enough of this. Let's get this project done. Let's not talk about every way not to get it done. Let's move forward and get it done. It's been long enough.
Okay.
A group of local developers are looking at buying some land by the Verizon Center and putting in a hotel there. Do you think they should have the right, do you think that the state should be able to use eminent domain to take properties that maybe that some of the owners don't want to sell?
No. I was in Concord when that legislation came forward. I don't believe that you should be taking somebody else's land for another entity to do a development. Absolutely not. If you said you were taking somebody's land for a road, because I can tell you that happened to my family. We used to own a farm down off of Island Pond Road, and it ran from the overpass to where Comcast is down at Candia Road. The highway came in and took the farm.
Mr. Mayor, speaking of your family,
Yes.
there's a proposal for a new flag for the city of Manchester. I saw something about a tricolor for France and something for the Irish. Are you going to insist that the blue stripe be independent Greek blue?
I can only say to you that this morning, when I was reading that article, I said, I bet I know a question that's going to be asked of me today. This will certainly be checking to see, one, if I read the paper and what my feeling was about the flag. I can tell you that, no, I don't support changing the flag. Flags are about history. And that flag has been a Manchester flag for an awful lot of years. And it certainly tells you the history of the city when you look at the flag. So no, I don't support a new flag. A dear friend of mine, I'm sure you know, was Hubie McDonough. And he used to, he was around with the state flag for many years to get it done.
Yep.
So no, I don't support the change of the flag.
On a more serious subject, you have said that you are pro-choice
Yes.
versus, is that abortion under any circumstances?
Well, number one, let's talk about the issue that I know you want to ask me about. No, I would never use taxpayers' dollars to fund Planned Parenthood. No, I will come to, I will come to that, I will come to your answer. And two, there's no question that that was a retroactive payment, and that should not happen when that department is in the red. That's just wrong.
You're talking about the contract.
The contract with-
Executive Council and the
voted for it.
governor passed, yeah.
I can't believe that anybody that wants to be the governor of this great state would take that vote, forgetting about whether they're pro-choice or pro-life, and say that we're going to continue to pay that bill even though that department is in the red. That makes no sense to me.
Okay.
But I am pro-choice. I'm against partial birth abortion.
So
I'm opposed.
there are limits.
There are limits. I'm opposed to the morning after pill to a minor, and I'm in favor of parental notification.
parental notification being that if a minor is going to a doctor to seek an abortion, you believe that the parents
Should be notified. Yes.
And the abortion doesn't take place without the parents?
That's my belief, yes.
Right, okay.
Some, as you know, elephants have long memories, Republicans have long memories. They remember when Ted Gatsas was in the Senate and helped get rid of Tom Eaton with the support of a lot of Democrats at that time. They remember the Gatsas plan that Joe referenced that had a lot of Democratic votes, but not enough Republican votes. In this primary, how do you convince conservative Republicans you'll be their governor?
And that's a great question, and I take you back to Tom Eaton.
Yep.
Tom Eaton didn't get the Senate presidency because he didn't have Democrats vote for him. So it was no different when I took over in mid-year. I can tell you that we were, myself and Dick Green, we were put down in a basement office, and it was right next to the cafeteria. Probably the best place that we were put, because every House member used to come by and come in and chat with us. And we used to talk about solutions to problems in there. And we got a lot of things done when it came to education funding, and they needed a plan that worked. They came down to talk to us. So I can tell you that when we roll up our sleeves and go to work, we're the first ones in, the last ones to leave. Just like we are at City Hall, and the same thing I would plan on being as the next governor of this great state.
Mr. Mayor, were you in the state senate at any time when the question came up about the liquor commission money that's supposed to go to address liquor and drug problems, but instead has been used for general fund and other issues?
I was in the Senate at that time. Ned Gordon was the prime sponsor of that legislation. He brought it forward. I supported it. And I think that it's important that we take a look at that because right now, they're looking for funds for prevention, for recovery, and those dollars were supposed to be there to take care of that.
So you, at no time, voted to take that funding and use it for other purposes?
That's a good question. I can't give you a direct answer because I don't remember. I know I was there when the appropriation, when it was introduced, so I can't tell you that I didn't vote for a budget that might have not appropriated those dollars.
Okay, that's fine.
How would your style of governing be different than Maggie Hassan's? How would you describe the type of governor she's been versus the type of governor you'd be?
Well, I think it all has to do with leadership. I think experience. I think that if you know how to move through the hallways of Concord and how to get people to understand what you're trying to present to them, I think it makes a big difference. I think you have to have the solutions to come forward to make sure that people know that this, I think, is the best plan, and it's a simple plan, and let's get it done. When people say to me that there's $5 million that hasn't got to the streets for this opiate crisis, I can remember being in the Senate, and in one day, we passed legislation in the House and the Senate because there was not enough money to help folks for heat and energy costs because the government didn't send us enough. In one day, we moved money around from the Reggie Fund to get these folks oil and electricity to pay for their bills. It was done in one day. This is taking 7 months, 8 months, and it's still not happening. That is wrong.
Are you running now because it's an open seat and you have a better shot as opposed to in the past? You've been mayor for some time now. Why now?
Well, that's a great question. And, I believe that if you look at the past times that people asked me if I would run, I looked at it. There was no question. But there must have been somebody upstairs telling me that it wasn't the time because my health wasn't 100%. I'm now at 100%. And I can tell you that when we campaign, there is nobody that campaigns harder than us. We're in 5 counties on Saturday. So when you look at a campaign, you've got to be ready to go. As I was spending time with my wife after the election of mayor, it was probably in December, and she looked at me and she said, it's time.
Okay, we're going to blame this on Cassandra.
You can.
All right.
Be careful, she's pretty tough.
Thank you very much for coming in.
My pleasure, thanks for having me.
We wish you great success, as we do all the candidates. Thanks for participating in democracy.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mayor.
Okay.
All right. Just one sec. Do you want us to stay?